We've got the team here now. Clive, yep, is the team here for the GHD report? Yeah, come to the table. Thank you. Apparently you have a presentation for us.
Hold up, I need to
Sorry, is it going to just have like a 30, a few minutes?
Eh?
What time are you preparing to get on lunch? It's just...
1 o'clock I was planning.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm just going to, while they're sitting up, I'm just going to stop.
I didn't stop.
Oh, pit stop. Okay.
I didn't.
Thank you.
Jump in the city, Morris. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to welcome Morris Hoban to the table. So Morris is from GHD and has been independently running this process on behalf of the council. So Morris has got a brief presentation that provides the background.
Fantastic, thanks Brendan. Look, what I wanted to do was just give just a little bit of context to the report, because I'm aware that what's sitting in front of you is actually, it's a terms of reference document that's meant for an expert panel. And I think for this discussion, I wanted to give just a little bit of context about how we've arrived at that report that's in front of you. So what I'm hoping to cover is just talk briefly about my role. I'd like to run through the process that we've undertaken to get to the terms of reference that's in front. Talk a bit about the principles that have been agreed when working with the community and also with council through that through this period, and then finally just provide some context around the terms of reference themselves and also the expert panel, and hopefully what I'm hoping that you all agree here today. All right. Okay, so there's the resolution that was put forward from this council in December last year, and the bit that I wanted to focus on was this last sentence, in particular the bit around the details of which will be determined after consultation with affected communities, and essentially that's what my role and what I've been doing since April of this year. So I've been working with the community to develop the terms of reference. The second part of that role is to appoint a peer review expert panel that will review that terms of reference, and they will respond to that terms of reference. And the third thing is to support the panel to deliver a final peer review report and ultimately bring that back to council here. The process to date. Where this started was I was working with the community governance managers back in March. Now they set up a number of community meetings with 4 of those, in fact, we had a range of respondents, so there's or community members that came to that, ranging from sort of 20 to over 200 at a number of those events. Some of the feedback I guess I wanted to share with you was, I guess my observations from those meetings was that there's a real mixed views on the findings of the report from the community. There was really polarised views on the need to act, on the science itself, particularly around kind of climate change and sea level rise, and on the description of I guess how those impacts would translate into the local environment here, things like erosion, beaches, those kinds of things. So there were a wide range of views shared, also in terms of the role of government and local government in terms of responding to this, and also just what's going on in the physical environment out there. So there's a real kind of variety. And the final point around that was there was a lot of mistrust in the process, I guess, to date, and that was also even in the process of developing this terms of reference and arriving at a point where there's a terms of reference and an independent panel in that process. So that was the feeling, very much so, at the end of March and in April when we had those meetings. Since then, what we've done is we put nominations out to the community, and for the community to nominate members for a community representative group. And that group is a group that I would work with more deliberately to develop the terms of reference. And And that was important because it was quite difficult to deal with 18,000 people, or even the 200 or 300 people, I guess, that put their name forward to be informed through this process. So we had people put forward from New Brighton, South Shore, Sumner, Diamond Harbour, and Akaroa, so from Devotional. And so a really good representation from a wide group of communities that were identified within the report. So I've worked with that group from mid-April through to mid-May. We've had 2 very long meetings and lots of debate and deliberation within those, and we've worked very much by phone and online to arrive at the document that's in front of you. Now, the 2 things we looked at were the drafting of the terms of reference, and the second was on the list of experts. So that list of experts was informed by the community, so they put forward their suggestions, and all residents had the ability to do that. We informed that process as GHD in terms of approaching a range of experts from across New Zealand and internationally to come forward as part of that process to form a long list. And that long list has been debated by the community reference group, and they've putting forward, as you've seen in the report, their recommendations of the panel that they would like to see taken forward to engage in the terms of reference. And that's leading us to here that where the terms of reference are being heard today. So that's the process to date. So what I wanted to, I guess, share was some general principles that have come out in that engagement with the community. So that started with the bigger meetings we've had with communities, as well as through with that community representative group. So the first principle is this real desire to have transparent and open process through this process, but also just engaging on this issue. The second is that is this notion that all questions that were raised, so whether they were raised at the community meetings, whether they sent through submissions to us, and we had over 100 submissions, we had over 60 phone calls, long phone calls and deliberations and discussions with community members through that process, and all of those questions raised should be visible to all. So they should be visible to the council, they should be visible to the community at large, and also to the peer review panel as well, so they just get a feeling for the range of questions and issues that have been raised by the community. The third point there is that there's a real desire to keep this moving, as what I've heard within the community, not to the detriment of good process, but there's certainly a kind of a desire to seek to move towards resolution of a number of issues, and I think that's important. And that community group that I've worked with over the last month have worked very hard to get to a point where this terms of reference is in front of you today. The general aim when I was working with that community group was towards consensus. We didn't achieve that all the time. Part of my role, I guess, was to go with the majority when we needed to push that forward and move it forward. Really driving values through this process of teamwork and collaboration, respect, safety. I think there's been a lot of issues and pointing around individuals through this process, so I want to make sure that we can remove a lot of that through how we operate. And integrity, so it's constructive, it's open, and we're doing what we're saying we're doing. So that's those are the kind of the values that I've shared and we've agreed in working with the community through this process. And the final point was around taking steps to address bias. And so what do I mean by bias? Is that all of you and everyone here has a view in pertaining to lots of these, but in this issue in particular. As I've already sort of intimated, there are polar views around a lot of these things within the community. So how do we take steps to remove bias? And I think we ended up with a really good group of people as part of the community representative group that had different points of view, where they all came out and we had to work through that to work towards consensus. And that's similar when we're thinking about appointing a group of experts to review what is a considerable issue here for the city. And I guess we've looked at a number of ways to do that, and one way is to ensure that we've got at least 3 scientists, because it's mostly a science-based review, 3 scientists who are on that panel, so they can remove any kind of bias, and they can bring their expert knowledge and views to this. Okay, finally around the principles is just, I guess, questions around the responses or actions. So we had to agree what was out of scope, and what was very much in scope was around the science and methods and data and things used within this report that's informing decisions being made. What this wasn't about, a lot of responses that we've had from the community have been about, well, what are we doing about this risk? And why are we not building walls or doing something now? And can we kind of get some movement on those areas? So this is not about right now. The scope of this review is not about the management options. It's not about defences you might want to put in place around risks like this. It's not about the need for additional monitoring or policy responses, or even what goes on LIMS. And I'd sort of suggest that I've been working quite closely with the community just to ensure that actually this is about the science, the reports and the decisions being made to feed into this. And that at some point, these things need to be examined at some point in the future. So the terms of reference themselves. So the scope of the review, as agreed with that group, is to review the report. So this is the report that's undertaken by Tonkin and Taylor around hazard assessment, so around the coastal environment. So very much the report, but also the brief that was provided to Tonkin and Taylor and that they responded to. So that's in scope for the community, for the expert peer review panel to look at that brief. But also is to look at the report's adherence to national policy and statutory requirements. So I sit on a leadership team within a engineering, environmental and planning consultancy, and often we refer to national statute or policy to inform our assumptions or methods or direction that we take. And this is what's been asked of the panel too, is to look at those national policy and statutes and just ask the question, have they been used appropriately within the findings of the report and the methodology and assumptions being made? Okay, and then I guess that final point there is that we want the panel to access all information. So what you see is a short terms of reference with appendices, which is all of the background information that's been provided. Okay, now responding to the questions raised. So it's a big undertaking for any peer review panel to try and respond to every individual question that's been raised by the community in this regard. And I would suggest that we don't want that to happen. And certainly that's the view of the community reference group as well, is one that in addressing the questions, we want them to look at a range of things. So first we want them to look at, is the question relevant to the scope of the peer review? We also want them to look at, should the question be addressed in the report or should it have been addressed in the report? And if it has the question sufficiently been addressed within the report? And then what we also want to make sure that we give scope to experts. We're going to commission experts. Let's ask them to recommend or guide or provide any guidance the panel might want to provide around how we could address some of those questions if they feel they're relevant going forward. Okay, then the experts. So there's only one point I really wanted to make here, is that the community reference group have put together have recommended their panel of experts that they would like. There was long deliberation around this, and what I wanted to make you aware of is there's no guarantee that those 5 people that have been put forward are the ones that that we will be able to secure in the coming weeks should we want to move forward next. Because they themselves are only seeing this terms of reference in the same time frame that you're seeing it too. So I'll need to be negotiating with them and making sure that they're comfortable with the role that they're going to play. And one of those 5 might suggest that they might come back and say, well, look, they don't want to. So that's why I wanted to put up a wider group of shortlisted experts that are there. So where has been a very long list, it's come down to a short list. That short list, in my view, is a group of people that that the community representative community would be fairly comfortable with. I don't believe that there's going to be ever absolute consensus around that, and that's something we might need to work through if one of those don't become available. Okay, so what's next? After today, hopefully what we'll do is we'll appoint a peer review panel. They will respond to the terms of reference. Now, the step that we've asked to put into, that the community representative group have asked, is that we get a draft of that review report that comes from the panel, and that both the community reference group and the council get the opportunity to review that, and then go back with any points of clarification. And then there's a time period that the peer review panel can respond to that, and then a final report will come to this council. And there's again, I appreciate there's a timeline that we're aiming for here, but should that timeline need to change, then, and for whatever reason, for example, the peer review don't believe they can actually do their work within that time frame, then we might need to change that. Okay, so what I'm hoping to agree is to get broad acceptance of the terms of reference. I'm hoping that there's a range of questions in there that need to respond to, but actually the intent is that the peer review panel assess those questions in their own right. They're the experts, and that's what we want them to do. And also to agree the short list of experts, starting with the nominations that have been made by the community reference group. I just wanted to make you aware that this information and the process, and we keep regular updates out to the community. There's a website up and running. We send out every fortnight an update to those community members who have registered interest. We send that information out. And moving forward, I think there's I guess an observation for myself is there's a real desire from the community to tackle everything through this process, including the solutions we talked about. But I also think that we've now at a point of broad recognition that this is just one of those steps that we're going to have to take, to gain better understanding of the hazards, the science, the risk for the community, and the actions that both council and the community need to take in response to this. My own view is actually there's an opportunity to build on this process around how you bring the council and the community together once this peer review has been undertaken. But that's I guess that's my own view I want to share. Any thoughts?
Well, look, thank you very much. That's an excellent presentation, and I have to say that it's been hugely challenging, this issue for the council, and I think that we got to the position that we got to because we were in a rush through the replacement district plan review process, and we were required to do every single chapter of our district plan. I think if we're going to do a lessons learned from our experience, the lesson would be that in a post-disaster environment, if you're going to use it as an opportunity to review your district plan, just choose the areas that need to be done in response to the event and allow a longer time frame for those areas that actually require this level of community engagement. And I think the model that has arisen out of what was a disastrous entree into the coastal hazards arena is a superb model. I've been quoting the CANCERN motto, when it set itself up. One of their mottos was the wisdom of the community always exceeds the knowledge of the experts, and I don't believe that's correct. I believe that the knowledge of the community, the wisdom of the community coupled with the knowledge of the experts always produces more than one can do on its own. And it's the collective wisdom of the community and their knowledge and experience of the environment that they live in, and some of the history of the area that may not be documented, but people have got great memories, that you combine that with the wisdom of the experts and you end up with a really good model for engagement. So I just think that this is a stunning piece of work that we've seen, but we've started off down the track in a very unfortunate way. I should say that I'm in my coastal erosion 2 zone. and I received a letter from you to invite me to participate in the process, and I'm nowhere near the coastline. So it was, it's been a stunning process, and everyone that got those letters knew that they could engage and register with the process, but I didn't register because I trust the process. So thank you very much. Glenn Filjani.
Oh, thank you. And just on the process, is it your sense that the community does own this process? We had a Red Zone meeting last night about process, and the community, you know, they decided how they wanted to be engaged with.
Yeah.
They called the shots. So are you sense that over this?
Do I have a sense that they own the process? I think this is about collaboration ultimately, and there was a real sense of emotion at the outset from those first meetings, and that I guess my sense around that was that most of that emotion was around process, and the more that we can involve and get communities involved in that process, I think a better outcome.
Absolutely.
Because there's no doubt in my mind that hazards generally are things that need to be owned by the community, and as well as council and other institutes and organisations, and that requires real collaboration.
Bill?
I want to ask you about the links with communities too, because clearly not only the local communities who've been directly involved, who it affects most immediately, have been fully involved, but given that it also affects every community across the city, I'm just wondering about, in terms of the recommendations of the panel, and clearly it's an illustrious group of scientists and people with legal appropriate expertise. But I'm just wondering, given how important the community part is, if there could not, within the terms of reference, be a second local scientist expert in addition, given, and probably especially because our local geography scientists would have the best knowledge, for example, of Pegasus Bay and the coastal geomorphology in this area. So is there still scope to strengthen the local science component on the panel?
I'm not sure if we can get this back up onto the screen. There we go. So we've canvassed a number of local scientists through the process, and some of them have taken them out of the process or been seen to be conflicted by the community representative group, either because of past, involvement with the authors of the report or with council themselves, so that made it quite challenging in terms of finding local representation. Martin Single, who's up there, is available and could be included as part of that process. My view is there's a cost issue ultimately as well in terms of how many people you want to get involved. I think 3 scientists is a good number. Whether you want to include another local scientist, we take out one of the nationals or internationals.
I think clearly it has national implications.
It does.
But equally, this is something this council has asked for, and we've got to get it right. We're all in agreement on that. So, I guess it just seems to me that if you have a combined dual local specialised scientific knowledge on that panel, that may well assist getting the best result.
I'd agree with that. And
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yanni?
Thank you very much. That was a really outstanding presentation, and it's really comforting to hear just how much you're working with the communities. That's really, really, really great. I just had 2 questions really. One was, do you have any concern that people in some of the areas that aren't traditionally associated with the coast have been sort of left out of this process?
No, I got a letter.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but when you think about coastal erosion and coastal inundation, obviously for people that live in the coastal environment, they're quite, probably more well aware of the issues. But people in Linwood, Woolston, Bromley, I know on the reference group there's no one from that area. So
Yeah.
Is that a gap that you've identified, or is that an area that you're seeking to do more work in?
So certainly the people that were identified being affected within Bromley and, in those areas,
Yeah,
they
I know they all got a letter.
They certainly got a letter, and I know there were a number who attended some of the community meetings as well, and we're able to nominate people through to that process too. So, in terms of process, I'm feeling comfortable that there was the ability for those affected people to feed into that process.
Yeah.
I think there is acknowledgement in that hazards, whether they're coastal or others, actually affect everybody in the city, and I think looking a long way forward, how you engage with the wider community of Christchurch around hazards, I think is really important.
Okay. And then the second question was, I'm just still not quite clear about the relationship with the current district plan review. So, for example, an area is being notified for intensification, quite massive intensification that's in the middle of these coastal inundation zones, and it just seemed to me a bit kind of odd that you would have the peer review happening, but then also at the same time a kind of a push to intensify housing in like that Linwood area, when that area is subject to this review.
What's the question?
Well, like, how is this review informing the current district plan work? I mean, I thought initially the whole purpose of this was to reduce intensification or development in areas.
No, that's the end point,
No, I
Yanni.
understand
That's
that.
after we process the information.
Yes,
So we
so-
actually haven't done the coastal hazards chapter. This
No,
will
we've-
inform
we've come back,
the
that's
work
right.
that we will do on the coastal hazard chapter, which we will not commence until after the replacement district plan is in
but
place.
commencing a system of intensification in one of the areas that's being reviewed.
Yanni, that's not for this question. This is the person that we've brought in
Different topic.
to help us do a peer review of the Tonkin and Taylor report. Your question is
my
best
question-
directed to the district plan review.
Well, do you think it would be wise to halt the intensification proposals until this peer review's been concluded?
Thank you, Leanne. I don't think it's in my it's not my role to comment in terms of the policy and even infrastructure or other decisions whilst we go through this process. I do think that this process needs to feed into wider discussion and debate about policy as well as infrastructure and other decisions, and I dearly hope we'll get to that point and it'll feed into that process.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Jimmy?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I have two questions. The first one regarding the time frame, especially from today till the 3rd of June, it's only the 8 days, am I right? Until next Friday, you need to engage 5 categories, the different specialists, science, maybe legal advisor, and also the kind of another expert. Whether 1 week is too optimistic or not.
So I've already been quite engaged with all of those experts.
Yes.
So all of these experts on this table here are all prepared and ready, waiting for the outcome of the decisions made here today. I'll be in contact with them directly after this meeting from tomorrow to start negotiations that need to go into the terms of reference.
Okay.
So they're all aware. They've all said to me direct that they are available. They're available through the time frame that we've specified here to feed into this process.
Yes.
What they're not aware of is the detail within the terms of reference. They've got that now through this public process, and over the coming days and week, I will be getting their feedback on the terms of reference and negotiating the contractual arrangements to start undertaking this work.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I'm confident that we can do that.
That's good.
Yes.
Second question, James. Whether you can talk to us roughly the cost regarding to this, the kind of peer review cost, roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah, roughly. Just
Yeah,
roughly.
look, and I'll certainly be able to tell you more about that once I've gone through that negotiation of the last week.
Okay, yeah.
Look, I would expect that you they are experts. There's quite a fair bit of work for this group to work through. I think it's really important that we have a legal representation for somebody like Shona or Gordon as examples. They are great people at being able to bring that together into one outcome, and they're worth their weight in gold. So how long's a piece of string? It could be anywhere sort of between 15 and 30,000 as an example, but I haven't got clear figures on that yet.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Look, I've actually decided that my comment was more of a point of debate, and I'd like to just probably signal my desire to move this paper, and I'll reserve comment for debate.
Okay, so it's moved by David, seconded by Glenn.
Yep.
I'll open it up for debate.
Well, look, I'd like to flag an amendment to add an additional member, if possible, to the panel.
Well,
That's going to be a point of my debate. So
okay.
That might be good.
Well,
could I just make the point here that I think, and I'm still reserving my right to reply to the debate, I disagree with Phil. And look, we have approved an independent and transparent community reference group, and I think it's like a hearings panel. They've come back to us with a recommendation. We either accept it, we reject it,
look,
or we
that
send
is
it
my
back to
view
them.
too, but a councillor is entitled to move an amendment. So we've got a motion that's been moved and seconded. An amendment is to add an additional representative who is
From the short list that's been provided with us, but so besides Dr. Dedra Hart, who was already on the recommended for the panel, that we also include Dr. Martin Single.
okay. So do I have a seconder for that?
A seconder.
Pauline. Right.
And
Okay.
for clarification, all those names have been okayed by the community groups. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Now I've asked that exact question so would the community representative group be happy with all of the names that are on there?
Yes.
Broadly, I would suggest that there's might not be consensus. I think there's broad agreement they'll be happy. I certainly think from my dealings that I don't think there'd be any objection to Martin.
Thank you.
Right, that's a good steer.
Okay. So I'll open it up for debate. And but I'll put debating the amendment and the resolution, and then I'll put the amendment and I'll put the resolution at the end. So David, would you like to kick off the debate?
On the
amendment? on the motion.
On the amendment first, or
We're going to do it all in one debate. So if people could speak to the amendment as well, if they want to, as well as the resolution. But you've already spoken to the amendment. But if you want to lead off the debate,
I'd rather finish it, thanks.
but you get to finish it. You've moved the motion.
No, no.
You get a right of reply.
Oh, I'll get a right of reply. Okay.
Just give them
I'd like to probably.
I'm being fair.
Yeah, I disagree with Phil in the amendment of putting an extra panel member on here. I believe that we have gone to great lengths to avoid any involvement of council staff, councillors, or anyone else in this process. We have turned it over to a totally independent group, and as I said a moment ago, they are an independent community reference group that we've set up, and I believe that their findings should be treated as if we were receiving a hearings panel recommendation. We either agree with their recommendations, we reject their recommendations, or we send it back for further consideration. I don't believe that we should be altering the report that we have before us here today, and I actually totally reject the amendment. And I'll speak. I'll carry on, I suppose. this is a subject that's been very close to my heart for a long time, and it sort of goes right back to when we originally had the Tonkin and Taylor report before us in council, and I was the only one that voted against its adoption. Subsequently, that report was used as the basis for our district planning process with coastal hazards. Planning and mapping was predicated on that report. That then evolved into a considerable amount of angst in our community with the coastal hazard mapping and coastal inundation mapping that resulted, and eventually, after quite a lengthy period of appeal to the independent hearing panel, the government removed our the need to do our district plan in that area. We then called for a peer review. I'll just backtrack. One of the issues that has given rise to this call for a peer review is the fact that 6,000 plus residents have information on their limbs that we, as a result of the Local Government Act, are required to take note of, and whether or not we agree with the report that we have, we are required to acknowledge it. So consequently, that's led to a further calling for an independent peer review process. We've gone down that track now. I must say, my initial concern was with this peer review process that we weren't going to be totally independent, that council staff would have an influence over the process. And I met with Morris last night, and I said to him that I had some initial reservations in the fact that he had an involvement with a roadshow with Tonkin and Taylor. But look, I've been kept in the loop with this process for several months now. Brendan and Clive have had regular meetings with me, just keeping me up to date with the process that's been evolving. I have had extremely favourable reports from the members of that community reference group who have worked tirelessly over a long period. They have had meetings that have gone for in excess of 5 hours, debating a number of questions and scenarios that have been posed to them. So look, I've looked at the report that we have before us here today, and I have absolute confidence in the scope of works that we have commissioned Morris and his team to do. And I would urge people to look at in the report that GHD have provided us, item 3, the scope of the peer review, and I'll just read the paragraph there. The purpose of the peer review is to provide the community and the council with an impartial and expert view on the data, methods and assumptions used within the report when responding to the brief set by the council. In doing so, the peer review panel might want to review and critique the terms of reference provided by council and the peer review brief and report by Hume Consulting. I think this is all-encompassing, and there are a number of 4 bullet points below that of really specific questions that drill down into the whole core of how this panel was going to operate. The final bit was item 7, which I think Morris alluded to before, that we are in this process getting a draft back of the peer review, at which time both the independent reference group and council will have the opportunity to look at that report and address any questions of clarification that may be required before finalising the report. And the last sentence in there, the report will reflect the professional views of the team member experts, not those of their respective organisations. And for me, that is the key part of the whole peer review process, that we have engaged in a process that's totally separated from our council staff, ourselves, and we have come back with what I believe is a very comprehensive and all-encompassing recommendation, and for us to be suggesting alteration to that, I think is totally outside the terms of reference we have set this group, and I'm very happy to recommend that we adopt the report and the short list of expert panel members as presented to us today.
So, and you will accept that that's your right of reply as well?
Pardon?
You will accept that your right of... I should have put the timer up for the timing, but you're okay with that? You've...
Oh, well, I might want to...
No, I mean, I honestly think, you know, because I mean, yeah.
Carry on.
Is that all right? Thank you. Glenn.
Thank you. I just want to very quickly just touch on something which I think is very pertinent. That's the dynamic that sits behind this. So what I sense in the community, that what's critical here is about the community owning the process. It's about thoughtfulness and respect. It's about similar things we heard last night at the process over future engagement over the residential red zone. What I see here is a shift along the IAP2 spectrum from informing, which we did, to collaboration, and I think that's what's really critical here. Now, the persons that's been proposed to be added to the committee, I don't have an issue with the merits or otherwise of the person, their skills, whatever, but I actually do have an issue on the basis that it hasn't come from the community. And I think how it will come across, it'll be interpreted as another kind of council doing this to us. So, look, I'm not against, you know, Phil and Pauline's suggestion on the grounds of the person. It's just that this is so sensitive, it's about the process. So I actually won't go with it on those grounds.
Phil.
Look, this is sensitive really to every community in Christchurch in the long-term future. And by adding some additional expertise, like, how can that actually be wrong in terms of arriving at the best science? And that's one of the objectives, is to check, does the report represent good science? Martin Single is on the short list. We've heard from Morris that, in fact, in his view, the local community reference group wouldn't object to Dr. Single being part of the panel. It's really, I think the whole point is, how do we make sure that this is best value for money, given that this is a huge investment by this council, and it's part, to me, having that scientific expertise, as the Mayor said, fits alongside and actually adds to the expertise and knowledge and wisdom of the community. So it just, to me, makes total sense that you strengthen the panel. And like, it may well be that one of these members isn't available anyway, but they've both been shortlisted on page 167. And I just think a part that needs to be strengthened in all this is the actual high level of expertise around Pegasus Bay, and these two people, Dr. Deidre Hart and Dr. Single, have studied this for a good period of time. All of that information is right at their fingertips. I'd urge councillors to include that expertise so that this council gets the Tonkin and Taylor report right.
Yanni and then Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I mean, you know, like, a number of us would have received letters through the post and we could have chosen to engage, but actually, you know, I had confidence, as the Mayor has stated, that it was really important that we did actually stand back as a council to give the community confidence in the process. So I strongly endorse the points that have been made previously around, actually, there's been a very collaborative community process around the appointments of the panel members, and I personally can't see any need for us to change that now. And I do worry about the signal that will send to those people that have on top of all the other stresses they've gone through and all the other pressures and all the drama that happened previously, for putting all the good work at risk of us coming in at the last minute and putting an additional person on the panel, I think isn't worth it. So I would strongly urge councillors to allow the community process to do its thing, and wait until we get that peer review, and then make judgments as to the quality of the information in it, if you wish. And if you want more advice then go for it. But at the moment, I really don't want to get in the way of what I think. We've heard the presentation. I think it's been an outstanding process, and I would strongly urge councillors to reject the amendment.
Paul?
Look, I just want to endorse everything that's been said so far, but also acknowledge the work that has been done, not only by the experts here, but actually by the council for stepping up saying we've made a mistake, we've moved too quickly and we haven't got it right. We've actually stepped back, engaged our community in the process that probably should have happened straight away. But here we are today, we've got the process right. I'm really, really comfortable. It caused a huge amount of angst amongst the coastal areas in particular, but I also want to take up Yanni's point around making sure that we do continue to talk to those people through Bromley, right up through Linwood to the Lancaster Park areas, which does come under some issues if projections are correct in the future. So I'd just like to make sure we do still continue on and talk with those communities, make sure they are fully aware of what's going on. But I'm really, really happy to support this here. I'm happy to support the amendment to go along with that, and I look forward to getting this process underway so we can make a good, solid decision.
Yeah.
Supporting the amendment.
Well, look, Andrew.
Yeah, I certainly understand and respect the arguments that Phil puts in support of the amendment and adding the extra name, but on this one, I respect the view of the ward councillors who are closest to the affected communities. I appreciate the angst and the sensitivity around this, and I think this has been a really good and really collaborative process. I'd defer to the ward councillors who are closest to the communities on this one. It's so important that we get this right. So whilst I understand the argument of adding the additional expert, I'll be supporting the resolution but without the amendment.
But I also feel the same way. I think that, that things did not get off to a good start because we were in such a rush and under so much pressure. We've got time now to step back from the process, and I think Yanni's words was spot on, that stepping back and allowing somebody with some independence to lead the process in engagement, in a truly engaged process with our communities, I just think is a process that I want to support as well. So I won't support the amendment either. So on that basis, can I put the...
Excuse me, Madam Chair, could I just point out the terms of reference from GHD on page 166 and 167 have a short list that we're seeking the council approval for. The community reference group have nominated its preferred expert panel. As Morris suggested, we still do need to go through a process with whether it's the 5 or the 6 that have been individually identified, and I'm just wondering if one of those wasn't able to participate in the peer review, the intention would be then to go back to the shortlist on page 166 and 167 and to continue to work through replacement within one of those categories.
Yeah, but I think the replacement has to be within the category, because otherwise you disrupt what is international, national and local.
Yes, and that's the intent. So
is that, do we need to change anything on this?
No. I just wonder, the recommendations A and B find that if you were to make a resolution specific to...
I have a sneaking feeling it's not going to pass.
Yeah.
But I think what they're saying really is that we've put the actual shortlist up there, the actual recommended panel, but and are we sort of by that recommendation confining ourselves to those 5 names, or not allowing the panel to go through the process
to go to the short list?
Of actually
so approve the recommended list of experts to form the panel and anyone, and to allow substitution within
The relevant
within the shortlist.
The shortlist relevant category.
The relevant category of the shortlist, should they not be available.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll put the amendment first while you busily write up those words, and the amendment is that Martin Single be added to the panel, and that's been moved and seconded, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
No. That's lost, but I will have a show of hands. So those in favour?
Actually, I voted wrongly.
This is the,
Yeah,
The amendment
the
only.
amendment
No, I voted
only.
wrongly.
This is the one you weren't involved with a minute ago.
Yeah.
you've actually already
Yeah, I
put it
did
up
it
the,
wrongly.
It's the amendment.
The amendment.
It's Phil's amendment.
Phil's
Are you
amendment.
actually voting to allow?
You spoke against it.
just,
All right.
you've actually just, you've actually put it in B.
It's just the amendment. So those in favour of the
Of Phil's
amendment,
amendment.
Phil's amendment.
But you've actually got an amendment to the, can I just, can you scroll down?
it's just that Martin Single be added, that's that, that's it.
Did you
We're
have a
only,
second?
only the amendment.
Okay.
So who's in favour of the amendment?
Well, I voted wrongly, yeah.
And those opposed?
Yeah.
Right, so that's lost. So now the resolution is as it stands, just tidied up there to allow substitution from the short list, should any of the, but from the relevant category of the short list.
Yep, that's,
Yep.
that's good. Yep.
All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's excellent work. Right, and we will now adjourn for lunch. So we've taken out. Okay, 2:30, return. Thank you.
Thank you.